Hi, my name is Kennedy Kuchowski, and this project will be looking at the conservation mismatch within the continental United States. The first article that I referred to for this project is called U.S. Protected Lands Mismatch Biodiversity Species. In this article, the authors provide GIS data layers that identify where in the continental U.S. endemic species, or species whose habitat is specific to a certain area, are located. If a species is endemic, it's at a higher risk for extinction than other species. So the data is presented in 4 layers that represent mammals, amphibians, birds, and trees. The maps in this slide were created using those data layers to provide a visual representation of where the highest densities of endemic species are located in the US. As we can see in these maps, the endemic species in the US are most densely located in the southeast of the country. So that first article caught the attention of a group of researchers who responded to it with the article on the left. So Brown et al. Said that what the Jenkins article proposed wasn't viable economically or biologically, and that actions and specific objectives should be prioritized over species and places. In response to Brown, as seen on the right, Jenkins et al. Said that species risk of extinction is more important than the cost and convenience, and that the main priority should be maintaining and protecting biodiversity. Also, they said that instead of specific objectives, conservation strategies should vary based on local needs and processes. Another article that I referred to is Predicting Extinction Risk in Declining Species, which looked at how certain biological traits impact a species' vulnerability to extinction. As shown in the diagram on the right, the article talked about the 4 main processes that contribute to extinction, which are habitat loss, overexploitation, introduced species, and chains of extinction. It then goes on to describe other factors that have an impact, with a particular emphasis on the biological traits that are associated with higher vulnerability to extinction. So the traits that have the most impact on vulnerability are slow life history, like small litter sizes or slow reproductive cycles, high trophic level or a high position on the food chain, small population density, geographic range, because larger ranges are at a higher risk for habitat loss, body mass, so larger animals are at a higher risk, and island endemic species. So the question that I'm asking is essentially whether the areas that are in need of protection are the areas that are currently protected. To answer this question, I'll refer back to the data from the Jenkins et al. Article and compare that information to the currently protected areas in the US. This will allow me to determine if the areas that are at risk for extinction and biodiversity loss are the same areas that are protected. To start answering this question, I first combined the data layers from the Jenkins et al. Article into one map. To do this, I built a model shown on the left. The blue ovals represent each data layer, and adding them together results in a new data layer, the green oval, which is then shown on the map in the right. This map represents the concentration of all of the endemic species in the US. This next map represents the currently protected areas in the United States using the layers taken from the USGS Protected Areas database. As shown in the model at the top of the slide, I created this map by first making every protected area into a point on a map, and then highlighting only the areas where there was a high concentration of those points. So as we can see, the highest density of protected areas typically occur in the west of the country, with the exception on the North Midwest and the southern part of Florida. So when we look at these 2 maps next to each other, it's obvious that the areas that are in need of protection are not the areas that are currently protected. That tells us that something needs to change and that we need to focus on protecting the land that has a high concentration of species that are at risk of extinction. So the next question is, how do we do that? Well, one way to do it is to increase protection of some of the areas that are currently public lands so that there's less recreational use and a more strict protection of the area. However, a lot of this unprotected land is actually privately owned, meaning that a good way to protect it would be through land trusts like conservation easements. The Nature Conservancy is an organization that conserves and restores land across the US. One of the ways that they do this is by using conservation easements, which is when the organization basically pays the landowner to give the conservancy the rights to develop on that land. So essentially nobody can touch it. Another way they do this is by purchasing land and then creating an easement for it, then selling it to a landowner who agrees to the terms of that easement. Referring back to the Gittleman article and the box and arrows diagram, we know that vulnerability to extinction often depends on specific biological traits of a species. Because of this, I think it'd be helpful to do some further research into determining where exactly species that have those high-risk traits are in order to identify which of the high priority areas should be protected first. Again, my name is Kennedy Kuchowski, and thank you for your attention.